Un minuto. Oh, we are live. All right. Let me try to get YouTube. I'm just trying to get this so I can get it for people to watch. There we go. View on the watch. I think I got it now. All right, let me make sure. Sorry, I'll be ready to start here in about 1 minute. I know, I'm ruining it. I'll get this later. All right, chapter 12. Let's get at it. I think this is going to be Massachusetts. I still got to take pictures of this. There's so much stuff in here that is so good. There's 10. Oh, I think that was 12. All right. Let me get this recording ready. All right. Make sure. All right. Chapter 12. Virginia, the royal government. A royal government was now established in Virginia. The new administration consisted of a governor and 12 councilors. The General Assembly of the colony was left undisturbed, and the rights of the colonists remained as before. The Governor Wyatt was continued in office, and in making up the new council, the king wisely selected the friends of the colony rather than the untried partisans of his court. The Virginians found in the change of government as much cause of gratitude as of grief. Charles I, the successor of King James, paid but little attention to the affairs of his American colony. By and by, the commerce in tobacco attracted his notice, and he attempted to gain a monopoly of the trade, but the colonial authorities defeated the project. It is worthy of note that at this time the king recognized the Virginia Assembly as a rightfully constituted body. The reply which was returned to his proposal was signed by the governor and council and by 31 of the burgesses. In 1626, Governor Wyatt retired from office, and Yeardley, the old friend of the colonists, was reappointed. The young state was never more prosperous than under this administration, which was ended with the governor's death in 1627. Oh. Let me turn my phone off. Or down. There we go. Let's get back to where we were. At this time, the king recognized the... Get rid of the bing, bing, bong. Where did I end at? 7. 1627. 1627. During the preceding summer, 1,000 new immigrants had come to swell the population of the province. The Council of Virginia had a right, in case of emergency, to elect a governor. In this manner, Francis West was chosen by the councilors, but as soon as the death of Yeardley was known in England, King Charles commissioned John Harvey to assume the government. He arrived in the autumn of 1629, and from this time until 1635, the colony was distracted with the presence of a most unpopular chief magistrate. He began his administration by taking the part of certain land speculators against the people. Finally, the Assembly of 1635 passed a resolution that Sir John Harvey be thrust out of office and Captain West be appointed in his place, until the king's pleasure may be known in this matter. But King Charles treated the whole affair with contempt. The commissioners appointed by the councilors of Virginia to conduct Harvey's impeachment were refused a hearing, and he was restored to the governorship of the colony. He continued in power until the year 1639, when he was superseded by Wyatt, who ruled until the spring of 1642. About this time, monarchy was abolished in England. Oliver Cromwell was made Lord Protector of the Commonwealth. By him, the nation was ruled until 1658, when he was succeeded by his son Richard. But the latter became alarmed at the dangers around him and resigned. Soon afterward, Charles II, exiled son of Charles I, was called home, and on the 18th of May, 1660, was restored to the throne of England. Virginia shared in some degree the distractions of the mother country. In 1642, Sir William Berkeley became governor of the colony and remained in office for 10 years. His administration, notwithstanding the troubles abroad, was noted as a time of rapid growth and development. The laws were greatly improved. The old disputes about the lands were satisfactorily settled. Cruel punishments were abolished and taxes equalized. The General Assembly was regularly convened, and Virginia became a free and prosperous state. In 1646, there were 20,000 people in the colony. In March of 1643, a law was enacted by the Assembly declaring that no person who disbelieved the doctrines of the English Church should be allowed to teach or to preach the gospel within the limits of Virginia. This act was the source of much bitterness among the people. The few Puritans in the colony were excluded from places of trust, and some were driven from their homes. Governor Berkeley was a leader in these persecutions, by which all friendly relations with New England were broken off for many years. Next came another war with the Indians. Early in 1644, the natives, believing that there still remained a hope of destroying the English, planned a general massacre. On the 18th of April, when the authorities were off their guard, the savages fell upon the frontier settlements, and before assistance could be brought, murdered 300 people. The warriors fled, but were followed by the English and driven into the woods and swamps. Opechacano was captured and died a prisoner. The tribes were punished without mercy and were soon glad to buy a peace by the cession of large tracts of land. During the Commonwealth, an ordinance was passed by Parliament laying heavy restrictions on commerce of such English colonies as refused to acknowledge the supremacy of Cromwell's government. Foreign ships were forbidden to enter the colonial harbors. In 1651, the Navigation Act was passed, and the trade of the colonies was still more seriously distressed. In this new law, it was enacted that the foreign commerce of Virginia should be carried on wholly in English vessels and directed exclusively to the ports of England. The Virginians opposed these measures, and Cromwell determined to compel obedience. A war vessel with commissioners on board was sent into the Chesapeake. Negotiations were opened. An offer of peace was made and gladly accepted. The terms of the settlement were very favorable to popular liberty. The commercial restrictions were removed, and the trade of the colony was made as free as that of England. English liberty was guaranteed to every citizen, and Virginia grew again prosperous. For a while, the colonists conducted their government as they would. The important matter of choosing a governor was submitted to the House of Burgesses. When so great a power had been once exercised, it was not likely to be relinquished. 3 governors were chosen in this way, and the privilege of electing soon became a right. The Assembly even declared that such a right existed, and that it should not be taken away. In 1660, Samuel Matthews, the last of the 3 elected governors, died. The Burgesses were convened, and an ordinance passed declaring that the supreme authority of Virginia was in the colony, and would continue there until a delegate should arrive from the British government. The House then elected as governor Sir William Berkeley, who acknowledged the right of the Burgesses to choose. The question of recognizing Charles II as the king was debated at the same session, but not decided. Most of the people desired the restoration, but prudence forbade an open expression of such a preference. As soon as it was known in Virginia that Charles II had become king, Governor Berkeley issued writs in the name of the king for the election of a new assembly. The adherents of the Commonwealth were thrust out of office, and royal favorites established in their places. The Virginians soon found that they had exchanged a republican tyrant with good principles for a monarchical tyrant with bad ones. The former commercial system was reenacted in a worse form than ever. The new law provided that all colonial commerce should be carried on in English ships. The trade of the colonies was burdened with a heavy tax, and tobacco, the staple of Virginia, could be sold nowhere but in England. King Charles, regarding the British Empire as personal property, soon began to reward the profligates who thronged his court by granting them large tracts of land in Virginia. It was no uncommon thing for an American planter to find that his farm was given away to some flatterer of the royal household. Great distress was occasioned by these unjust grants, and finally, in 1673, the king set a limit to his own recklessness by giving away the whole state. Lord Culpeper and the Earl of Arlington received a deed by which was granted to them for 31 years all the country called Virginia. The colonial legislation of these times was selfish and narrow-minded. The aristocratic party in the colony had obtained control of the House of Burgesses, and the new laws were as bad as those of England. A statute was passed against the Baptists, and the peace-loving Quakers were fined and persecuted. Personal property was heavily taxed, while the large estates were exempt. The salaries of the officers were secured by a duty on tobacco, and the biennial election of the Burgesses was abolished. When the people were worn out with the governor's exactions, they availed themselves of a pretext to assert their rights. Let me redo that real quick. Sorry. Even though I'm messing up a lot today. Where is it? And the biennial election and the biennial election of the burgesses was abolished. When the people were worn out with the governor's When the people were worn out with the governor's exactions, they availed themselves of a pretext to assert their rights by force of arms. A war with the Susquehanna Indians furnished the occasion for an insurrection. The tribes about the head of Chesapeake Bay had been attacked by the Senecas and driven from their homes. They, in turn, fell upon the English settlers of Maryland, and the banks of the Potomac became the scene of a border war. Virginia and Maryland made common cause. John Washington, great-grandfather of the first president, led a company of militia against the Indians and compelled them to sue for peace. 6 of their chieftains went into Virginia as ambassadors and were foully murdered. This atrocity maddened the savages, and a devastating warfare raged along the whole frontier. Governor Berkeley sided with the Indians, but the colonists remembered only the acts of treachery of which the red men had been guilty and thirsted for revenge. There was a division of opinion among the people. The aristocratic party took sides with the governor and favored a peace, while the popular party, led by young Nathaniel Bacon, clamored for war. 500 men rushed to arms, and the march was begun into the enemy's country. Berkeley and the aristocratic faction were enraged and proclaimed Bacon a traitor. Troops were levied to disperse the militia, but scarcely had Berkeley and his forces left Jamestown when another popular uprising compelled him to return. Bacon came home victorious. The old assembly was broken up and a new one elected on the basis of universal suffrage. Bacon was chosen a member and made commander-in-chief of the Virginia Army. The governor refused to sign his commission, but Bacon appealed the people, and Berkeley was compelled to yield. The governor was also obliged to sign a paper commending Bacon's loyalty, zeal, and patriotism. A military force was now stationed on the frontier, and peace returned to all the settlements. But Berkeley was proud and vengeful and only awaited an opportunity to begin the struggle anew. In a short time, he repaired to the country of Gloucester, where he summoned a convention of loyalists, and Bacon was again proclaimed a traitor. The governor's forces were collected on the eastern shore of the Chesapeake. The crews of some English ships were joined to his command, and the fleet set sail for Jamestown. The place was taken without much resistance, but when Bacon and the patriots drew near, the loyal forces went over to his standard. Berkeley was again obliged to fly, and the capital was held by the People's Party. It was now rumored that the English fleet was approaching for the subjugation of the colonies. The Patriot leaders held a council, and it was decided that Jamestown would be burned. Accordingly, in the dusk of the evening, the torch was applied, and only town in Virginia was laid in... I don't know what's going on. I need to get a drink. Man, I can't read right now. Maybe it's because my AC is just bugging me out that it's turned on right now. Accordingly, in the dusk of... All right. Where am I at? Clamor for war. Accordingly, in the dusk of the evening, the torch was applied, and the only town in Virginia was laid in ashes. In this juncture of affairs, Bacon fell sick and died. The Patriot party, discouraged by the loss of their leader, was easily dispersed. A few feeble efforts were made to revive the cause of the people, but the animating spirit was gone. The Royalists found an able captain in Robert Beverly, and the authority of the governor was rapidly restored. The cause of the people and the leader of the people had died together. Berkeley's vindictive passions were now let loose upon the defeated insurgents. 22 of the leading patriots were seized and hanged with scarcely time to bid their friends farewell. Thus died Thomas Hansford, the first American who gave his life for freedom. Thus perished Edmund Cheeseman, Thomas Wilford, and William Drummond, martyrs to liberty. Nor is it certain when the executions would have ended, had not the assembly met and passed an act that no more blood should be spilt for past offenses. When Charles II heard of Berkeley's ferocity, he exclaimed, "The old fool has taken away more lives in that poor country than I for the murder of my father." The consequences of the rebellion were very disastrous. Berkeley and the aristocratic party had now a good excuse for suppressing all liberal principles. The printing press was interdicted. Education was forbidden. To speak or write anything against the administration or in defense of the late insurrection was made a crime to be punished by fine or whipping. If the offense should be 3 times repeated, it was declared to be treason, punishable with death. The former methods of taxation were revived, and Virginia was left at the mercy of arbitrary rulers. Sounds like no. In 1675, Lord Culpeper, to whom with Arlington the province had been granted, obtained the appointment of governor for life. The right of the king was now thus relinquished, and Virginia became a proprietary government. The new magistrate arrived in 1680 and assumed the duties of his office. His administration was characterized by avarice and dishonesty. Regarding Virginia as his personal estate, he treated the Virginians as his tenants and slaves. In 1683, Arlington surrendered his claim to Culpeper, who thus became sole proprietor as well as governor. But before he could proceed to further mischief, his career was cut short by the king. Charles II found in Culpeper's vices and frauds a sufficient excuse to remove him from office and to revoke his patent. In 1684, Virginia again became a royal province under the government of Lord Howard of Effingham, who continued in office until near the close of the century. The affairs of the colony during the next 50 years are not of sufficient interest and importance to require extended voice. When the French and Indian War shall come, Virginia will show to the world that the labors of Smith and Gosnold and Bacon were not in vain. Recapitulation. Royal government is established. The administration is unchanged. Charles I becomes king. Recognized the Virginia Assembly. Yeardley is re-elected governor. Dies. West is chosen by the council. Harvey arrives from England. Land grants vex the people. Harvey is impeached, but is sustained by the king. Wyatt succeeds. Monarchy is abolished in England. Cromwell becomes protector. Berkeley becomes governor. The Puritans are persecuted. An Indian war arises. The savages are beaten. Cromwell restricts the commerce of Virginia, sends a fleet to America, and the Virginians submit. Favorable terms are granted. Peace continues during the Commonwealth. The Burgesses elect 3 governors. Berkeley is thus chosen. At the Restoration, issues writs in the king's name. Tyranny follows. Commerce is restricted. The Virginians complain. Charles II gives away Virginia lands. And finally, the whole state to Arlington and Culpeper. The Quakers and the Baptists are persecuted. Taxes are odious. The people rebel. An Indian war is the excuse. Bacon heads the insurrection. The Indians are punished. Berkeley flees, returns, captures Jamestown. Bacon takes the place and burns it, dies. The patriots are dispersed, and the leaders hanged. A despotism is established. Culpeper becomes governor, treats Virginia as an estate. Arlington surrenders his claim. The king recalls the grant, and Virginia becomes a royal province. Howard administers the government. Wow. There's a lot of information there I did not know. Or, yeah, I don't think I knew. Like, you don't realize how each of these states prior to our independence were treated like many countries owned by another place and had to treat the king as if, like, yeah, we know we got our independence, but a lot of people don't realize what that means. Like, what it just said is people were getting hanged for speaking differently against the king and their appointees, but the king was also giving away the whole property when a lot of people were used to having somewhat private property. So all of a sudden, like, people were used to living a certain way and they didn't have a king. The king was gone. So people were living as if they had no king, and there was just like separate. Then all of a sudden the king comes back to England, and then they have to follow all the orders and take their appointed leaders that didn't do anything. It's like, I like that last line though. When the French and Indian War shall come, Virginia will show to the world that the labors of Smith and Gosnold and Bacon were not in vain. I can only imagine what it was like to feel like you were winning and getting, standing up for what you believe in. Then all of a sudden the guy dies and there is no leader to take his place. And then you have 23 people hung, and then the king has to say, stop killing people. But imagine how you're treated after that. Like, you're an enemy of the state. They're saying, like, no, they didn't want people educated. That blows my mind. Like, they didn't, and increase taxes. Suppressing all liberal principles. And liberal back in this time has a totally different meaning than what it means now. The printing press was interdicted. Education was forbidden. I'll be honest, I don't know what interdicted means. I'll look that up real quick, since we're on a live stream anyways. I assume it means taken away, because that would go with, yep, interdict, to prohibit or place under an ecclesiastical or legal sanction, to forbid or debar, especially authoritatively, to cut or destroy a line of communication by firepower so as to halt an enemy's advance. Holy cow. So yes, there was a printing press. Do you understand what that means our Constitution stood for? The people, like it even said that the great-grandfather of Washington took a part in some of this. So you're talking people who went through this stuff, had the printing press taken away on American soil, had their right to educate people taken away, started getting taxed by someone who didn't even live in their land that they worked on. But we just take it for granted that it can't be taken away. But it was taken away from free people. And they wanted to make a government that ensured that it wasn't taken away. That blows my mind at how little we actually think about that. Blows my mind. Let's see. Whew. I'll take a break for that right now because I'm having a hard time reading today. I don't know what it is. I think my mouth is just dry. But wow, that is amazing. I got to get these other ones done up too, that are done and on just a video form. A lot of people don't want to hear just my random thoughts like this. But man, either way, thanks for listening if you listened.